everyone. Welcome to Like a Boss, Women in Tech. And we've got an unusual application of tech today. So most people, when they're thinking about it, oh, it's SaaS tech. You've got some subscription, some cool, some something funky service. Well, Laura Schaack is going to blow your mind with what she's just launched. It's called TatTech. And yes, you heard that right. TatTech as in ink, as in tattoos, as in go find the right designer that you need and tattoo artist so that when you get your permanent ink on your skin, you're going to be really happy with the outcome. So, hey, welcome, Laura.
Thank you.
So, tell us a little bit about TatTech. You've just gotten started and you've launched. Tell us exactly what you're doing and what the impetus was behind it to start this business.
Absolutely. So I began actually in the early stage tech world about 8 years ago. So I've been working underneath founders in almost every role I've had. I've been working in app development companies. So I've been really close to the tech world already. I also have a lot of tattoos. And as they say a lot, necessity is the mother of invention. So I just ended up combining those things. I have been sitting on this idea for probably about 6 years. It took me about 6 years to get up the guts to do this, honestly, and the planning and the funding and all of that good stuff as well. But it was almost working so closely in the tech world with founders. It was almost inevitable that eventually I would become one as well.
Well, let's, talk to our audience about that because one of the things when I ask, the folks on my podcast here, what would they have done differently? They all say they wish they would have started sooner. So tell us a little more about why it took you so long and what the advantage was of doing some of the, I guess, the pre-marketing, building your lists and things, getting your funding, as you said, to get ready. Let's hear that side of it because you've been very planful.
Yeah, so there's probably two things about the timeline. So first of all, my own background. So I kind of had, whenever I began this just about over a year ago, I kind of had all the different tools that I need personally and professionally in order to, I think, be really successful. So not only had I helped to launch multiple tech startups from the ground up, and I mean, we barely had a landing page, right? Like I'm not getting paid, like that type of startup. So I had that very early stage experience. I worked at an incubator and helped tech companies scale at that Series A, Series B. So I'd seen things really, 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 really grow. And then I'd also had the experience at an app development agency. So then I had the tech side, the really in-depth managing engineer side. So then I came to a point in my career where I was like, wow, I have this kind of trifecta of experience that I personally, as a sole founder, can probably be really successful doing this on my own. So in probably the last 12 months, I spent about 6 months doing the strategic planning. And then at about month 6 is whenever I had my designers, my developers moving, and then did a ton of work on the ground in order to get a huge following for this company before it's launching, right? So I did a ton of influencer marketing. I did a ton of social media marketing. I did, some press. I did probably the most important one for TAT at the very least was our ambassador program. And that's also kind of ties a little bit into the DNA of TatTech, just because TatTech isn't something for, your celebrity tattoo artists, right? TatTech is very much for discovery of those local tattoo artists that aren't discovered because they don't know social media marketing. So they're not found on Instagram or whatever it is, right? So it really also democratizes sort of the artist discovery process, which is why I really wanted to build it from the ground up. It's very much a grassroots movement, right? So with our ambassador program, what we actually did, I only launched in 12 launch cities, right? The 12 most tattooed cities in the US. And we had, we hand selected in between 5 and 6 individuals that were really, really close to our mission and what we're doing. Within is also wrapped in a lot of diversity and inclusion within the tattooing industry. And they sort of became our boots on the ground, really, really pushing forward the mission. And that is probably what got together a huge community already behind the app. So I launched with thousands of people on the wait list. I launched with thousands of tattoo artists in the database. I launched with thousands of social media followers, which isn't typical. But I think just because this idea hasn't ever been done before and there's so much need for it, there was just sort of immediate traction before even a product hit the market.
That's fantastic. And like you said, you really are unusual with respect to the different areas of experience. Like you did sort of all of the training and conditioning that you needed to do to be successful before you did anything. And you did all of the pre-marketing and steps to ensure that you had a successful launch. Like you said, you effectively launched before you did. I mean, this is phenomenal, Laura. Really exciting. A silly sort of side question on those top 12 tatted cities. Now, I think I've lived in a few, one of them being Richmond, Virginia. Is that on the list?
That's next to roll out. We have two more happening in 2020, and they're Richmond and Atlanta. So you can see what's coming.
There you go. Okay. Well, we'll have to check that out. Now, with respect to looking back and in hindsight, like I said, it's one of the questions I really like to ask my guests. If I gave you, instead of a tattoo wand, I'm going to give you a fairy wand and say, go back. You get to change one thing, Laura. What are you changing?
I think there's a few of those experiences that I was just referencing that I probably stayed a little too long at. So it's hard sometimes to make the leap, right? And especially whenever you're sitting there waiting for working in an early stage startup, you really want that equity to vest. And you really are pushing forward. I think you really need to call it at some point where you're sort of like, this isn't the place for me. And there were some that really wasn't the place for me. And I had sort of exhausted the amount that I'm going to take from it, at which point that job experience might be taking from you instead.
What's the hardest thing you've ever had to do, personally or professionally, whatever you feel comfortable sharing?
The hardest thing I've ever had to do. I moved to New York City at 17 with zero money.
Wow.
I left my entire family back in Texas and was the first one to do that in my family. So that was a really big leap. I think it is one of the most instrumental things that happened in my life that shaped me in a huge way that I'll never am still grasping. And I don't regret any part of it, but that was probably, a huge part of my life.
Why did you make that leap?
There are some people that learn entrepreneurship, and there's some people that are entrepreneurial by personality or by spirit. I actually teach entrepreneurship to middle school girls right now, which I think is so cool to find, like these 13-year-olds that want to be founders. To be really honest, with the tattoo idea too, I had worked so closely with founders, I wasn't sure I wanted to specifically found my own business. Because I'd seen it before, and it's like, it's not that sexy fun, like I'm my own boss and, this is so fun. And like people like really romanticize being a founder. And I had seen it up and close and personal so many times. It is very hard. It's just really hard. It's a lot more hard than it is fun and sexy, to be honest with you.
And so I agree with you that entrepreneurship has been, overly glamorized, right? And super hyped to the point now where you see high school and college students dropping out and saying, hell, I'll start a company. There's this misperception that it's going to lead to success. Whereas, we all know the stats, 92% don't see their first year anniversary. So I'm curious, when you go in and talk to these young gals, because I'm a fellow STEMinist, so like I'm all about it, and going in and talking to young gals and saying, go STEM, go tech. What do you tell them? Like, do they have these preconceived notions about what startup life is and how amazing it is? Or what's their perspective, and where do you bring them to? What's that arc of the story that you talk to them about?
So I think talking a little bit about my experiences and all the different failed startups that I was at and how difficult it is to really be in the industry is a message that I give them. They, of course, do see the glamour shot. And if that is what needs to happen to encourage young people to still go this path, then I'm okay with that.
One of the things that we hear a lot about, I mean, not just here on my podcast, but, in general, is that founders have difficulty getting started because they, A, can't part with the certainty, that sort of biweekly or bi-monthly, whatever it is, paycheck, and B, they just don't think that they have the capital to get things going. Can you talk to us about some of the approaches that you took to try to get that infusion of capital that you needed so that you could get the software development done?
Absolutely. So two things. I have and still do work a full-time job on top of Tatted.
So, that's how most of them do it. That's right.
So if you're waiting for, getting like a 6-figure paycheck to replace your cushy lifestyle right now, like you might be waiting for a very long time. So be willing to sort of put in the work, right? So, I've been working 2 jobs for almost a year and a half now, and that's okay because I love it. It doesn't feel like a job. It's a hobby. It's my passion. I absolutely love it. So that's no problem there. I, funnily enough, have, in my personal opinion, built probably one of the most scrappiest companies that I've seen in the startup market. And you can always, I think it's so important to make sure that capital is not wasted, and investors also at subsequent rounds love it. So the fact that I've built this company with $40,000 is insane to a lot of people, is like kind of mind blowing, honestly. And it's all about making sure that you're connected to the right people.
Indeed, right? None of us like the D word, right? Dilution. It's terrible. Now, you've referenced some of the, struggles and challenges with respect to startups a number of times. So on those hard days, tell us what keeps you going. Like, how do you get through it?
100% my community. So I mean, not only my community of ambassadors, but the people that I have working for me are exceptional, are absolutely exceptional. And it's kind of a wild thing to watch other people work their asses off for your own idea. Like I come to the table and they're working late nights, and I it's in disbelief that someone worked that hard to make something that I have been so passionate about, that I really want to accomplish, that make my dream come true, if you will. So really, those people keep me going. To me, even more important part of my mission of like, yes, I'm very excited to change how an industry operates and integrate tech in a huge way that it never has been before. I'm much more excited, honestly, to impact these groups that have previously been ignored within that community, because that's when I really see people respond and light up. And, that's the real change that I'm excited about.
Another question sort of related to that is, as you're getting going, like I said, you had an unusual collection of experience, sort of like all the prerequisites you need, right? To at least put you on the path towards success. But for our listeners that don't have that, do you recommend any particular book or podcast or something that could really help them out?
Yeah, so I think of course, your podcast.
Well, of course. Thank you, Laura.
You know what I mean? So, there's a million books and podcasts and blogs, and I think you can get really overwhelmed with the amount of sort of reading and materials. I think if you really want to sort of get into the startup or entrepreneurial space, there are a million entrepreneurs that will take free work, or if you're ready to maybe move a job and work for an entrepreneur, I think you need that experience, honestly, first. And there's so many things out there that are begging for teams that there's no way that you're going to have trouble finding that opportunity. Even if you're just, let's say, you're not ready to make the move yet, just volunteer for an entrepreneur. Say, hey, I can dedicate 6 hours a week of free work. Like, I think having that personal connection to it and actually seeing with your own eyes a little bit of the process is really, really, really necessary, honestly.
Excellent. Now, since this podcast is all about advice for the next generation of women in tech, what's your best tip?
Ooh, I think it is necessary, and I'm still refining how to take a balance in between really taking in what leaders and women before you tell you and what you need to leave behind. You know what I mean? Like, so definitely, as people are giving you advice, and a lot of people can be heavy-handed with that advice. It's not that, pay attention to what they're saying. You know what I mean? Like, respect what happened before you and take as much in, but also like have a keen ear on like, maybe that advice isn't for me. Maybe, the path that person took isn't necessarily for me. I'm sure that people would tell me that I should have raised 6 figures before I started this, or whatever the case may be, right? So, definitely see what you can take and leave.
Use your filter, right?
Yeah, be true to you.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, that's spot on. All right, last question here. Of course, actually, no, second last question. So first, we need to know how our audience can help you, where we can go to find Tatted. How do we get online and find a tattoo artist that can bring our vision of ink to life? Where do we do? Where do we go?
Absolutely. Go to the App Store, go to the Google Play Store, download it, Tatted, TATTD. You will be able to search by, it is the most aggregated data that for the first time you can search by location, by tattoo style, by price, even by keyword of a specific image that you want to see this tattoo artist has already done, and see your list of tattoo artists. You can help me out by getting out the word on social media. You can follow us at tatted_app.
Perfect. Okay, audience, you heard that. I'll have to do the same. And I'm going to sneak one more question in, actually. This is not a question we typically ask on our Like a Boss podcast. What is the most common sort of genre or theme of tattoos And is there one, or is it just so all over the place and equally distributed that no single sort of theme comes to the surface?
Ooh, there's a couple that maybe historically are have been done a little bit more, like American traditional has been around for a very long time. But at this point, there's all this data that custom tattoo work that can kind of almost forge two different types of styles, and that is really, really special. Like these people are artists, is actually what's driving the growth of the industry. So now that's diversifying quite a bit.
Okay, well, we had to know. Now, last question, I promise this time.
Nice.
We always ask if your shoe style was matched to your personality. Are you a boots, stilettos, flip flops, sneakers, or something else kind of gal?
I would be a high top sneaker type of person for my love of streetwear.
Okay. Well, now we know. So, all right, everyone. Thank you very much to Laura Schaack, founder of Tatted and really the pioneer of tattoo tech. So, we're going to be excited to watch this trajectory. Thank you so much, Laura, and all the best of luck with your launch here.
Thank you.
And how about that fantastic intro by Touch Circle?